A sudden twist in Congressman Duncan Hunter's corruption case. His wife Margaret changes her plea. What this could mean for Hunter's upcoming trial. KPBS travels to Texas to see how the military is being used at the border and how their mission is changing. And SDSU's scholarship problem. Millions of dollars were left on the table even as tuition continues to rise. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, reporter Morgan Cook of the San Diego Union-Tribune, KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh, and reporter Gary Robbins, also of the Union-Tribune. Well, making an appearance in Margaret Hunter's agreement to plead guilty to broad misuse of campaign funds was Egbert, the Hunter family rabbit. He enjoyed airplane flights costing hundreds of dollars. Among the more quirky expenses, federal prosecutors allege Congressman Duncan Hunter and his wife charged to his campaign accounts. It's unclear what sentence Margaret Hunter will receive after agreeing to plead guilty to a single conspiracy count and cooperate with prosecutors. But her husband vows to fight on toward his federal trial, now set for September. And Morgan, your stories alerted the public years ago to huge sums from campaign donors that Hunters allegedly spent illegally. Give us the overview of this case and how you got onto it in the first place.
I got onto this case in April 2016. Came across my desk that the Federal Election Commission had sent a letter to Duncan Hunter's campaign asking for some more information about some charges. It was about $1,300 for video games, which is unusual to see on a campaign's financial reports. And so they wanted to know about that, and there was also a charge for what appeared to be his children's private school. So we asked about that, and then after that story, we were kind of saying, well, let's just make sure that it's, an isolated thing and there's no other, stuff that we need to ask about. So
this is all there is to it, yeah.
Right. So we started looking back through older financial reports, and I just saw some more strange, sort of unusual charges, like payment to an oral surgeon, payment for a company that fixes and replaces garage doors, and just things that you don't really typically see.
It's associated with legitimate campaigns.
Right. So we were asking about those, and then we sort of zoomed out and said, well, there are also some kind of odd spending patterns that we don't typically see for campaigns, grocery stores, fast food restaurants, gas stations.
And remind us what it eventually got to with the indictment then?
Last year in August, he and his wife and former campaign manager, Margaret Hunter, were indicted on 60 counts stemming from their alleged misuse of campaign money for personal benefit.
Wow. And she's now, as part of this plea deal, she's cooperating with prosecutors. Does that mean she might testify against her husband in his trial?
The agreement does say that she will testify in front of any grand jury, federal jury, trial hearing that prosecutors deem necessary.
And her sentence, there's a range there, and it's determined what that might be yet?
Right. Sentencing guidelines put her at maximum exposure of 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. But, depending on the deal, depending on the judge's, determination of what is fair, she could receive a far lighter sentence. But we'll see. All
right. Well, set the scene for us there in federal court yesterday on Thursday. Margaret Hunter not wearing a wedding ring. Her husband wasn't there, right?
Right. She was alone. He was not there. She was not wearing a wedding ring. She seemed calm, but, couldn't have been an easy day.
Yeah, very rough day. And of course, a lot of media attention there has been on this case, certainly since the indictment and these court appearances. Now, could part of the motivation to plead out, I know we're speculating here, but there was her husband's interview on Fox TV right after the indictment claiming that she'd handled a checkbook since his time in the military, and despite evidence presented of his liaisons with various women, that was spelled out in the charges and all, and he still said, well, she was the one, I didn't do anything wrong. You think that might be part of the motivation to change here?
I don't know what her motivations are, but if I were in her place, I think I would be motivated by those things. Yeah.
All right. Now and I'm going to get to a statement here from her in a minute, but I wanted to to ask you, the plea agreement shows she and her husband conspired to spend funds when they knew it was wrong after warnings from campaign treasurers. What's the core of Duncan Hunter's defense going forward?
I do not know that, and I am really looking forward to finding out. He has said publicly, though, he has denied the allegations. He has said he was not involved in any criminal action. You know, any misspending, questionable spending was innocent mistakes, and, you know, that the spending, you know, largely was appropriate.
All right. I did want to get to that statement from her attorney on her behalf after the court hearing on Thursday. Let's hear that.
I am saddened for the hurt that I've caused my family and others. I understand that there will be more consequences stemming from my actions, but as demonstrated this morning with the entry of the plea, I've taken the first step to face those consequences.
And for our radio audience, who was that attorney? And he's speaking on her behalf, right? She hasn't spoken publicly following this yet.
Yeah. That was Thomas McNamara, her attorney, and she has not made any public statements at all. She has been very, very quiet until now. And, you know, I think that her plea agreement speaks for itself. And I think that probably there was a strong sense of responsibility on her part to try to do the right thing by her children and family. And I think that, I believe that. I think that's a step in the direction.
Steve?
No, in many ways, I've never covered a federal corruption case here, but I've covered them in Chicago and Gary, Indiana. And this, in a lot of ways, this is kind of par for the course. The feds, it's often very quiet in federal court. There aren't a lot of trials. The feds are very patient. They have a lot of resources. They take their time. This has been going on since before 2016. And they often line up the rest of the defendants in the case to testify against the main defendant, which I guess at this point is going to be Duncan Hunter. So, I mean, what do you think he might face now in court? I mean, how is this case going to play out?
My understanding so far is that this could complicate things for him, because she's pleaded to a count of conspiracy that names him as her co-conspirator. So that kind of, and also with the her agreement to cooperate, she has agreed to testify. So, yeah, I think that it might complicate things.
Well, that segues nicely, thank you, into, we do have a statement here. Congressman Hunter, of course, he's a Republican, staunch supporter of Donald Trump. He issued this statement following his wife's plea. I do not have the full details of Margaret's case, but it's obvious the Department of Justice went after her to get to me for political reasons. As Margaret's case concludes, she should be left alone. I'm the congressman. This is my campaign. Any further attention on the issue should be directed solely at me. And the statement went on to repeat his prior claims. Prosecutors in this case are politically biased. Criminal investigation was politically motivated. The matter should have been handled by the Federal Election Commission, not the DOJ. So that was his statement that was put out. Do we know, Morgan, anything about the couple's marriage at this point? Estranged, divorced, together?
We do not know. I have not seen a record of a divorce proceeding, and I don't know.
Okay. Gary?
Is it possible that she'll get off without any jail time at all based on the amount of cooperation she's providing here?
The judge will have a lot of discretion, and people have said to me, the possibility might exist for home detention, or some other much lighter form of punishment, if you will.
So that all remains to be seen. Now, Duncan Hunter, he was stripped of his House committee seats last year. He narrowly won re-election in November in a very conservative district that went for Donald Trump heavily in 2016. If he's convicted or pleads out now, how would he be replaced? What's the mechanism? Or do we know at this time? Is that set?
We do not know at this time. There's a lot of things that could happen. So if he pleads out, and it would probably come, typically they come with an agreement to resign from office.
So there'd be a special election even if you're close to the next general election?
I don't know.
Primary?
I know that there would be a special election depending on when it happened. Right. So
I would have to say that the clock has got to be ticking on Duncan Hunter. you know that if he's going to at some point plead out in this, among the things that they'll want him to do is probably plead to a felony, so he can't run again as a congressman, but also that he would resign his seat. So he's going to have to do something between now and that primary election, because if he loses that election and he's no longer a congressman, he loses a tremendous amount of leverage.
Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah, the time is ticking. Obviously, the pressure is much greater now, as we've said, with this plea change from his wife. One last question before we leave this segment. Duncan Hunter's next court date. What's the timetable there?
He has a hearing scheduled for July 1st. It's a hearing for motions in limine where they sort of, try to get the judge to make decisions about whether something can be entered into evidence and things like that.
Okay, we'll certainly be following up at that and watching that story. Well, we are going to move on. President Trump's decision last fall to place thousands of U.S. troops at the southern border was described as a stunt and a waste by critics. In the ensuing months, troops have been decidedly low profile in carrying out their non-combat mission. And Steve, you were in El Paso, Texas, assessing this situation this week. Start with how many troops are along the border? What sort of enforcement work are they doing?
Well, so we think there are about 4,000 right now, which is, that number is starting to shrink. It's gone down. The reason why we went to El Paso is we've been covering this since October, but the last time we've actually been able to see troops and talk to them directly, it was really since before Christmas. So when they offered to allow us to go and actually talk directly with the leaders at Army North and some of the troops along the border, we decided, if we have to go to El Paso, Texas, that's where we're going to go.
El Paso is nice this time of year, a little warm.
It's a little warm. It's very sunny. It's not unlike San Diego in some ways.
Yeah, a little warmer. You interviewed the task force commanders there in El Paso. How'd they characterize the mission for the troops?
So the most high-profile thing that they've been doing is laying of the concertina wire along the border. That's been the most visible thing. But that mission is wrapped up. So now the bulk of the troops that are still there, about 1,200 of them, are operating these mobile surveillance cameras. They're basically these trucks that are provided by the Border Patrol that overlook the border. There have been some incidents since they usually have about one or two contacts a week between migrants and members of the military. According to their commanders, it's mostly people looking for water, or they're looking for the Border Patrol, and they're looking to turn themselves in because they're asylum seekers.
All right, we do have some sound here from Brigadier General Walter Dusney. I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you. He described how this mission compares to others in his Army career. Let's hear that.
I'm a veteran of 3 combat tours, and have seen soldiers and Marines conducting lots of missions in lots of different places. But I'm just as proud of what our soldiers and Marines are doing here in this mission set, the impact that they're having on a day-to-day basis, and the great partnership that we have established with CBP, as any mission that I've ever been involved in 29 plus years in the Army.
Well, that sounds like the good soldier talking, right?
Exactly. They want to stress that this is not the military's mission, that they're here to support the Border Patrol. They went over some of the statistics. Since they've been there starting in October, they've been involved in helping with the apprehension of 13,000 migrants. They've also helped with the seizure of 3,000 pounds of marijuana, which is a decent number, though if you put that in context, the Customs and Border Protection, since the beginning of the year, 593,000 people have been detained. And they seize, on average, about 5,000 pounds of narcotics every month. So it's a very small portion of what is a much larger issue.
Right. And you chance to hear from the troops there, how they feel about this sort of duty?
Well, I mean, they say they're fine with it, at least the ones that we were able to talk to. The people who are in El Paso right now are from Fort Lewis McChord, right outside of Washington. They're an artillery company. They were practicing on a howitzer before they came there, so this is very different from what they would normally be doing. They're fine with it. The military wants to stress that they don't come into close contact with migrants very often. In fact, when I was talking to some of the folks that were doing this, they were saying that when they're monitoring these cameras, they often can't tell whether or not it's a person they're looking at or a cow.
They're that far away.
They're that far away.
Right.
And I think it has really been the intent of the military. They don't want to be in that kind of close contact. They don't want to be on the front lines.
Right. Now, relatively few encounters, as you're saying, but there were some notable incidents that you pointed out in your story.
No, there are. So some of the incidents include there was a Marine in Calexico who discharged his weapon. That's still under investigation. 2 soldiers outside of Clint, Texas, were briefly detained by Mexican military. They believed that the soldiers had crossed over the border into Mexico. Turned out that that was not true. And there was an incident in Yuma, Arizona, where members of the military saw someone what they thought was pointing a weapon at them, and they were eventually arrested by the Yuma County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, but some low-level stuff relatively, considering that there's thousands of folks along the border.
And the amount of troops, and the potential.
Now, tell us about El Paso. You spoke with some folks there. What do they say about the military and the mission there in their backyard?
So El Paso is a military town, much like San Diego. This is the home of Fort Bliss, so there's a real understanding of the military's role. Because they have been so out of the spotlight, so many behind the scenes, I would say there is even more focus on the border in El Paso, where they're right across the border from Juarez, even more than San Diego and Tijuana. El Paso is very dependent on the Mexican economy. So there's a tremendous amount of focus, but right now the military isn't taking the brunt of the criticism, and there is a lot of criticism in El Paso.
And that brings us to the changing mission, though. It could be evolving now as we move forward, right? Yeah. The mission for the military.
As I mentioned, the numbers seem to have been going down over the last few months, but they're set to ramp up again. The military, since Shanahan has taken over as acting defense head of secretary, he's agreed to build 6 soft-sided shelters to house migrants. They're also going to be transporting migrants and asylum seekers, and they're also going to do food service and things like that. So that will bring them in much more close proximity.
And of course, we've seen news reports here about conditions in holding camps. We've had news of 6 migrant children, 5 from Guatemala, 1 from El Salvador, dying in federal custody since September. Might the military presence, impact this and what some of the critics are saying about the conditions in those camps?
Again, even though it looks like the mission is beginning to ramp up a little bit more, we know that there are JAG officers that are going to be involved in immigration court there. There are medics that have been involved. But the military is still very reticent to become directly involved with migrants along the border. So the Border Patrol is still going to be the people who are taking the lead here for most of this.
All right. Well, with the numbers coming, as you note, from those triangle countries in Central America to our border and across the southern border, this is certainly something to keep an eye on in their engagement. All right, we're going to move on. It's a good story. We live in a time when many graduates stagger under heavy student loans and presidential candidates push free college tuition. So it's more than a little curious when $20 million in scholarship money is left on the table. But that's what happened at San Diego State University over the past decade. And Gary, a fascinating story. Start with the funds themselves. Where does this money come from in the first place?
So we're talking about San Diego State scholarships. This is money that is obtained by the San Diego State and managed by it. There's a lot of scholarships all over the country, but this is just the university. It has about 1,100 named scholarships, and over the past decade, the university has given, it had $63 million to give away, but it only gave away $43 million. So literally there was $20 million that could have gone to students that was left on the table.
And to be clear, SDSU does hand out thousands of scholarships totaling tens of millions of dollars, as you just noted. So, yeah. But they're a far cry from getting everything out the door there, which is kind of astonishing to me.
Well, there's several problems. About 15 years ago, they created their own homegrown system for managing all this and getting it out to people, publicizing it. It worked for a while, but it no longer works. It really hasn't been updated in a fast way. It's not a system for modern scholarships. So if you're a student trying to figure it out or their parent trying to help them, it's a very confusing system. It doesn't have complete information. It asks people to do things they shouldn't do. For example, you would have to apply for every single scholarship you wanted rather than just making one application, which would match you up with everything that, for which you might be eligible. So the system's antiquated. It's been this way for a long time. This precedes the new president, Adela De La Torre. But they began to notice the problem really in 2017, after a year in which they only gave away 60% of the money that they had available that year. So only 6 out of every $10.
Even though the UT and stories are in papers across the country and other news outlets are writing about tuition costs, the staggering debt, everything we talked about in the open.
I think it goes back to something Morgan and I were talking about earlier today, that you get the feeling that they didn't think anybody was watching or would watch or take a look at what was happening. It was just negligence in a lot of ways. And when you talk to people about it, they said, yeah, we could have given more away, but no one was cracking down. This goes back to Elliot Hirschman's administration and then into Sally Roush.
The two previous presidents
right.
of San
De La
Diego
Torre's
State.
been here a year this month.
Right.
She's come in and started to crack heads about it. I spoke to her yesterday, and she said she was meeting with her deans and was going to put a fire in their belly. Already they have increased some of the money, but they're still way away from where they need to be.
All right, before I get to, we're going to have a word here from the President, De La Torre. Before I get to that, I should point out KPBS broadcasting license is held by San Diego State University. So let's hear from the President, the current President, regarding this.
The CSU system is probably one of the most affordable systems. Our average debt is around $19,000 compared to the national debt level, which is over $37,000 for students. But I think, for example, when we look at cost of attendance, probably one of the biggest areas for our students is housing. And that's an area that I really want to partner with the city about, because I think for campuses like San Diego State or San Francisco State, the cost of attendance is largely driven not so much by tuition, but food and shelter, as well as costs of textbooks.
All right, she's sliding a little bit off the point there in that particular interview.
And there's something else that she did that a lot of people do. They say, well, we're among the lowest when it comes to debt. Well, the reality is that the average undergraduate who comes out of here with a degree owes about $15,000. That means that's about $160 a month of payment. It is not insignificant. Most people are coming out with entry-level jobs, so that can be a tremendous financial burden for someone just starting their life. Really, the focus should be on how do we ensure that they have less debt coming out of college, and part of that is making sure that the scholarships are given away.
And what if they're not?
Morgan?
Well, what if 1 year they get money for scholarships and they don't give it away? Does it go away? Is it like a use it or lose it kind of?
Most of it stays with them.
Okay.
But this is where a problem can accrete. If they're not continuing to pay attention, like they didn't give something away, say, for a couple of years, maybe they lose track of it. We've noticed that what they're doing now is going back and looking at all their money. Are they accounting for all of it? Do they know where it all is? Some of the things they found is that they have a lot of accounts in which particular scholarships don't have enough money, or they didn't modernize the criteria of the scholarship so that it would be that a large number or a reasonable number of people would be eligible for this kind of money.
Right.
So
is it all sitting there in an endowment to be used at some other time, or is this balancing the books somewhere else?
I think it's a combination of it. If you take all of the money, some portion of it is just me giving you cash. It comes from donors. Other money is essentially that, but it goes into endowment funds, so they try to earn interest to increase it and keep it going for long periods of time. But the $20 million doesn't go away. It simply hasn't been spent. They have a lot of money still to give away. I think probably the most damaging part here beyond students is a message it sends to donors. So if I'm giving you money, they had a 10-year campaign, they raised $800 million, and the university's saying, we need money for scholarships. But if you give it to them and then they don't donate it to students and get most of it out there, then donors may go, wait a minute, should I really be donating here?
There's plenty of other places for people of means to donate their money if they wish to.
It's a fixable problem. Right. They're purchasing a new system that they're going to install. It's used elsewhere in the CSU system. The problem is that there's not one good national database that's updated all the time that tells you how much, what percent of this money is typically given away by all colleges and universities. It's a piece of consumer information that is missing. So if you're going to apply here, is this school better than San Marcos or Long Beach or Fullerton? Parents need to know that because they're doing most of the decision making about money.
Well, we've got a little time left, but you interviewed experts in administration of college scholarship money, and what did they say about the SDSU situation?
They said that there is no reason that they can't give away 100%. So let's say, for example, I offer Morgan a scholarship. We want her to come. But then she, at the last minute, doesn't come. What they need to do then is go like, well, then I'm going to give the money to you because you're qualified as well. So one of the things I kept hearing was that they need to really focus in on seeing where the money's going. Are people checking off the boxes in every school and every department? Because the internal papers we saw said that this is a problem across the university. It's not in one place. So there's money. They just need to be more diligent about making sure that it, in fact, gets reviewed and gets handed out.
All right, last question. You must have gotten some response from parents and students, and I imagine this kind of frosts people a little bit.
It did. Most of it came digitally online. There's a great deal of love in this county for San Diego State University, and well so. It helped build this county. But there was disappointment in a lot of the emails saying, we trusted you with our money. Our kids need that money. What are you going to do about this? This doesn't sound like what you've been telling us. So it probably will have Delatorre says we are going to fix this, and she's moving to do it.
Well, we'll keep watching, and that's a big hot seat to be on, certainly. Yeah. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Morgan Cook of the San Diego Union Tribune, Steve Walsh of KPBS News, and Gary Robbins of the San Diego Union Tribune. And a reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today, and join us again next week on the Roundtable.